Now PX says that she gave you guys homework to make an opening speech on the issue of international schools in Malaysia. So who has not done this opening speech?
Wait, so do we speak it or do we actually type it down?
No, you're supposed to. I'm going to call some people to read it out. Siti, did you do it?
No.
Alright, so.
Where was the issue?
Alright, Ian. Let's see what you have for your opening speech.
Do I have to stand up?
You can sit down.
You should stand up to it tomorrow.
In peer pressure.
Honorable chairs and fellow delegates, the delegation of Malaysia believes that increasing the amount of international schools is important to our United Nations Assembly. This delegate feels that the lack of international exposure in local school curriculums is detrimental to the potential development of a country. The rise of international schools in Malaysia is being driven by government efforts to reform education and has since removed limits and introduced tax incentives in efforts to encourage growth of international schools. Aspiring to be a regional educational hub, the Malaysian Ministry of Education is promoting international schools internationally to attract more foreign students with key markets including South Korea, China, Indonesia, and Singapore, to name a few. The delegate of Malaysia invites other countries to do the same. Additionally, this delegate strongly encourages discussion on improving workers' rights in education and global recruitment, as it proves to be a great challenge in the education sector. This delegate hopes for a fruitful and constructive debate in order to solve this issue at hand today.
Alright, not bad. That was 55 seconds. Really good. Slow down. Oh, you're going very fast.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Who else wants to volunteer to read out their opening
I think you
speech?
should definitely put on the
Note, because to be fair, we wrote this like 5 minutes ago,
Well,
and we couldn't find information all week, so we emailed PX to give us inspiration, and we just kind of like got all our information from her speech.
Yeah,
So,
I asked them at lunch, they're like, oh, I'm gonna be
alright, you
Don't worry, girls. It's not like any of them have ever done that before. Big and awesome.
Alex, did you write one? Alright, Alex, why don't you come up with one right now?
Yeah,
Alright.
you don't have any time to
You can do
Yeah.
it. We already done that.
On the spot.
You're good at making things up.
Next assignment.
I did not make it up on the spot. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to be representing Malaysia at this year's Model United Nations Conference. Now, on the subject of international schools in Malaysia, the delegate of Malaysia realizes that while there are a moderate number of international schools present within the country, the delegate believes that this number could be increased, and it would be extremely beneficial to increasing the economy of our country as well as our reputation. It will also be a step forward to achieving one of the Millennium Development Goals in providing education to everybody within the country.
This guy's a pro.
This delegate wishes for a hopeful and fruitful debate. Thank you.
Alright. Okay, so sounds good. Okay, so Rachel is gonna get us started with resolutions, and she's gonna just introduce what a resolution is in the first place.
Okay, so basically a resolution is something that if you're in Thailand, you are basically with all, the delegates that have the same stance as you, and you come up with a bunch of solutions and put it nicely in a piece of paper so you guys can pretty much debate it. It's true though. That's basically what a resolution is. But there is a format that you follow based on the actual United Nations. So I just wrote out roughly. You start off with this. Oh, we can see. Can we get a? It's 6:29.
Oh, what's the rule?
You wrote it there.
No, I don't know how you say it. I heard business is
Business. No. Okay. So if you look at this, yeah. So you always have to start off with forum question of submitted by co-submitters and signatories, and that has to be bolded. There's usually a handbook which gives all the layout and stuff, but so you don't have to remember it, but it just comes naturally after a while. So the forum is basically the council you're in. The question of is topic, submitted by, and this is the important part. So the submitted by is the main submitter. And the main submitter is the person who reads out all the clauses, was probably the most important person in making the resolution, and will have to continue to defend the resolution throughout the whole conference. And the co-submitters are usually the people who helped the main submitter write this resolution. And signatories are basically the delegates who are interested in debating this resolution. So if you are, for example, a delegate of Malaysia, if you wrote the resolution, but you don't want to become a main submitter, then you are a co-submitter. If you did write the resolution and you are interested in debating it, then you become a signatory. So, is that clear? Yeah, okay. And then,
Question.
yeah.
As a main submitter, when you say you read out every single thing, you actually read out every word for word. Oh.
Yes,
Quite
but
painful.
again, that is up to the chair. So sometimes, from experience, chairs will, depending on time, may say that you don't have to read it out. They may only ask you to read out the operative clauses, which we'll get to the terminology later, or if they're feeling a bit evil, they just ask you to read out the entire thing.
Oh.
Yeah. Usually it's to kill time.
So a resolution is divided into two parts. The parts here in the beginning where you see there are italics in the front are known as preambulatory clauses. Now these don't really carry any meaning, but they set up a basis for your resolution. For example, it kind of just says, oh yeah, we recognize the concern expressed by Human Rights Commission, we welcome any effort. It's kind of just setting things up, setting the tone for it.
That is the context,
Yeah.
basically.
And then you head into the operative clauses. You enter the operative clauses, and this is where you have your list of actions. Now, these, suggest, request, strongly urges, and these are what you are urging your council members to take action on. And note that, these terms vary from the terms that you saw up there, and there are certain terms that can only be used by Security Council because Security Council has the power to enforce a certain action on states, but we'll not go into detail. One thing to note about preambulatory clauses is that when people are attacking resolutions, they don't normally attack the preambulatory clauses. So if you want to make a good resolution, don't focus on your preamps, focus on your operative clauses because that's where everyone focuses on. Now, for your operative clauses, what you want to do in order to make a strong resolution is to try and make it as precise and as specific as possible. Because if you're just beating around the bush so you can actually get enough clauses to make a resolution, people are going to come up and send in amendments that will strike those clauses, and eventually, if it's not a good resolution, they'll fail the resolution.
Basically, more is not better and less is not better. There's no fixed number, but sometimes the chair does say, okay, you guys need a minimum of 9 clauses or something, just because they know that delegates will, not write properly.
Like in the past, we've seen resolutions which have 22 clauses, and each of those clauses have sub-clauses, and those sub-clauses have several sub-clauses, and it's long. But then by the end of the committee session, by 90 minutes later, that number's just been brought down to like 14 because a lot of those were just redundant things that may have been said in clause 1, and then in clause 7 just kind of paraphrase it and change the wording. So be precise when you're making a resolution.
One thing to note when you are writing clauses, do not repeat. And what I mean by that is, for example, if one clause says something about education, and then clause 7 says something again about education, you want to bring that together so that you have one strong clause that says something about education. You don't want it all over your resolution because people will pick out on that and they'll attack it, they'll strike your clauses, and that's not what you want.
So we'll take this clause as an example. It looks like a lot of words, but it looks like a lot of words, but then a lot of it you can actually just cut it off because you're just beating around the bush. And another thing to notice that sometimes you want to include just so that you actually know what you're saying. Some things like sometimes conventions that the UN has already passed, previous resolutions, and you need to acknowledge them. When you talk about those in your resolution, yes, they make your resolution much stronger, but be prepared to answer questions from other delegates about what is that convention. And if you write that in your resolution, say convention like from like 1964, and then someone asks you, oh, what is that convention about? And you say, honestly, I have no idea. That is not very good. What's up?
Can you just search it out on the spot?
We've seen it before, and it's very unprofessional, and people laugh and they attack you for it. So, not very.
But what was my switch tabs? Like I searched it out before, just in case I forget, I can revisit the tab.
Write it out.
Oh,
Think about main the thing about being a main submitter, you're thinking about main submitting a resolution, you have to be prepared to think on your feet, because after you read out your resolution, before you move into your main submitter speech, which is 5 minutes, there is an unlimited time of which people can ask points of clarification. And points of clarification is regarding your resolution. And that means that they can ask you anything about your resolution. They can ask you, what does this mean? Why did you choose to put that in? And all that. And if you can't answer that, it kind of shows that you're kind of an incompetent main submitter.
Yeah, one of my first conferences I became a main submitter. So it is really challenging, and even though you think you know what you're talking about, people will come with questions from all over the place, and you'll have to think on your feet. And it is really what do you call it, nerve-wracking when you're doing that, when you're in that position. So
Well,
be prepared, but yeah.
what you can say if you're on the spot and you have no idea, no clue what to say, you can just say, this delegate will reply in note form.
Yeah.
Which means that you just write it down, like, then you can go research and then figure out what you're trying to say. So that's just another option. Oh, another thing to add, the real, not difficulty, but I guess the confusing part of the resolutions are that it's basically the layout. So if you notice, there's no full stops in the whole resolution. That's because the resolution from the word forum all the way to the end, it's one sentence. There's no full stops until the very end. Yeah, that's one thing to note. And things like colons and semicolons, the preambles.
Yeah, the formatting is very, very tedious, and so what happens after you send in a resolution to people to print is that it goes through this vetting committee that they look through formatting, and this part is very important. Do not plagiarize your clauses. Now, I've seen this in the past when someone will literally go for a resolution, and like, oh yeah, this resolution seems pretty legit, and they'll copy an entire clause, paste it into the resolution, and then certain conferences have plagiarism detectors, and so they use that, and then they'll come after you and say, hey, we found this entire clause plagiarized, and you get in trouble for it. So as tempting as it is to make your resolution look really, really solid, don't ever plagiarize a clause. That is really, really important. And like, some of my MUN friends have gotten in trouble for plagiarizing clauses, and it's a very, very severe thing. So please don't do that, especially if you're representing a GU, because that's not nice.
Like, even though I'm an after-school thing, or during school thing, and it's not really moderated by that many teachers, you don't see teachers coming in during debate time and things like that. So, but not many, yeah. And then, but it is still really frowned upon, and among all the others, all the other participants, it's really frowned upon.
But the thing about resolutions as well is, even if you're not plagiarizing anything, you have to be careful of the content that you're putting in your resolution. You don't want anything that's far too controversial or far too insulting to any religion or race or anything like that, because you will not be only attacked on, but you'll get in a lot of trouble. A lot of
I mean, you can, but then you just
No, a lot of trouble. Don't.
Hey, when you say trouble, what trouble?
Okay, I'll quote from experience. In the last MUN session I went to, this guy wrote a resolution, and he was delegate of Saudi Arabia, so he wrote some very controversial, insulting things about other religions that weren't anything to do with Islam. Yes. And he actually got so much in trouble that he was not allowed to attend any event for the rest of the weekend. That's how much trouble he can get.
And if you go further from that, we've had a bullying case from a student in another school, and that head of school, our head of school, contacted that head of school. That kid was kicked out of Mini-MUN club for the whole year, and possibly, if it got bad enough, could get kicked out of the school. I mean, it's like you're representing yourself playing sports in music or in any event, it doesn't matter. The fact is that you're trying to be a good person. And if you have some comments, for example, that are very rude and mean, actions will be followed up from the teacher supervisors, 100%. Zero tolerance for anything that's offensive to other people, okay? Don't forget that.
There's a fine line. Oh, yeah. There's a fine line between being funny, because MUN is about having fun, and you do see a lot of instances where people get roasted and burned and things like that. But there's a fine line between being funny and then just being plain rude.
But with that, there's actually a really, really funny side to like resolution writing. I remember a conference, I think it was the first one I went to. This guy wrote a clause to add in Elsa and a Death Star threat to the resolution, and it somehow got passed. So really, you can play with whatever you want.
And-
It is Model United Nations.
And the thing to remember about MUN when writing these resolutions or just debate in general is that you're not really in the real world. Yeah, you're talking about real world topics, but someone in this room, Alex, once sent in an amendment that said that, hey, the way that we should stop maritime piracy in Somalia is to build a wall around Somalia. So again, it's about having fun, and ultimately, well, we'll just wrap it up with the resolutions. Is that killer resolutions can come in many, many different ways. A killer resolution can either be your resolution is good, concise, exhaustive, or that the person that wrote the resolution is the killer themselves. So if you think you're good enough and you can defend a really bad resolution, that makes it a killer resolution as well. Okay, that's basically it. We'll take any questions if there are.
Yes, Marvin?
About plagiarism, what crosses the line to call it plagiarism? What happens if it seems like I plagiarized but actually made it my own, but it's an accidental copy?
You can't really do that because I don't think you can coincidentally have the exact same wording of a whole clause as a UN resolution.
Yeah.
I mean, if you took the main idea of their clause and then just put in your own words, that's not plagiarism. That's just, checking out different and getting inspired.
It's probably a little bit different to school in that you need to get ideas from other places for everyone because we don't know.
Yeah, and you're generating it among other delegates as well, so it's always going to be different.
Yeah.
Usually when you come up with clauses, it's not going to be like your own clause. It'll probably be amongst other delegates, and you're all going to share ideas.
I'm trying to find Alex's amendment.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Does the main submitter have to do it in your speech?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And how long does this opening speech need to be? Is it similar to the opening speech?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Ooh, that's long.
Yeah, basically,
Mine was
when
really
you
good.
if you're the main submitter, you have to make a speech after you read out all the clauses, which I know is really a pain. But after that, you have to make
5 minutes.
5-minute speech, and in that you have to try and persuade people to, vote for your resolution, why you think it's good. Maybe talk about some of the clauses that you put in there, which you think is important. Maybe think about recognizing that your resolution may not be perfect and asking them to make amendments, things like that. So, and also setting up some context if your preamps weren't enough. That's very important.
That's Alex, by the way.
Yeah.
Did you ask?
They get passed.
I was in character.
They get passed.
Yeah, just you.
Is there a difference in other committees like advisory panels? Because I think in advisory panels.
Yeah, it's different because especially in H1 committees like in SC, you don't have a resolution. You have something called a working paper. But I don't know if we want to cover that with them.
Alright. Just before we leave, let's give a round of applause to Rachel. So hopefully that gave you guys a better understanding of how to make killer resolutions. So when you are at your first MUN conference, which is going to be